Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dreamcore Tech. My name is Eugene, this is Sean, and today is launch day. It's the 3080 launch, right, Sean?
Yeah, and it also marks the first time that me and Eugene are on a show together, because if you've followed our videos so far, it's either me or him. So I think this is a great day.
Monumental indeed. So I think we're both here because the 3080 is such a, there's been so much hype leading up to the 3080 until today, and there's so much to talk about. One person can't do it alone. That's why the both of us are here to share our thoughts, our views, and whether you should get the 3080 or not.
Unfortunately, we don't have the Founders cards available to us. Founders cards are unfortunately not available in Singapore. So if any of you want to buy those cards, you would have to import them yourselves directly from Nvidia's website. Or if you have a friend in the US, you can get them to buy a card for you. What we have in Singapore is actually the AIB cards, or basically the cards that are made by MSI, Asus, Gigabyte, and all these so-called third-party card manufacturers.
Yep, but actually, there is some kind of negative connotation when we say third-party card manufacturers, right? But in reality, what all these card manufacturers do is they buy the same chip from Nvidia. It's the RTX3080, that's the GPU, right? And then they just put on a cooler, put on some fans, design it a different way, and then that is the graphics card. Effectively, it is equivalent to your Founders Edition, just maybe a different design.
And in fact, it may outperform the Founders Edition in some cases, because these manufacturers are able to put on beefier coolers, more powerful, more efficient VRMs, for example.
We have a couple of AIB cards here today. I guess one from MSI and one from Palit. We'll go through them later on. But for now, why not we talk about the differences that 3080 will bring to the landscape? Well, we'll start with some numbers, right? The first one is, of course, the performance of the 3080 to, I guess, previously, many people are comparing it to the 2080 Ti. Right, and that's because the 2080 Ti was the top of the line consumer card for the 20 series. The 3080 outperforms the 2080 Ti on, I guess, almost every metric. On paper, the 2080 Ti came in with 4,352 CUDA cores, but the 3080 comes in with double the number of CUDA cores, right? I believe exactly twice. That's 8,704.
Okay.
Yeah, Sean, what are CUDA cores?
Actually, I have no idea what CUDA cores. Eugene, would you like to share what CUDA cores are?
Sure, but instead of going on with my own interpretation of what CUDA cores are, I'm going to quote from gamersnexus.net. You can go there and check it out as well, right? So CUDA cores are responsible for processing all the data that is fed into and out of the GPU. It performs game graphics calculations that are resolved visually to the end user. Okay, so I guess what this means is that CUDA cores are responsible for rendering the scenery in game, drawing character models, resolving lighting and shading. Basically, they are the processing units within the GPU. So if you want to translate that into performance, the more CUDA cores you have, the better the performance, or in other words, the frame rate that you get in a particular game.
So what other features does the 3080 sport? Just based on Nvidia's sort of vanilla offering?
Well, besides having double the number of CUDA cores to the 2080 Ti, you have now 10 gigabytes of GDDR6X memory. That's VRAM, right? Video memory dedicated to your graphics card. Whereas the 2080 Ti had slightly more, actually, 11 gigs, but at GDDR6.
Okay, so we do expect the 3080 to outperform still the 2080 Ti, yeah?
Well, yeah. Despite having a lower number, a smaller VRAM. 10 is less than 11, right? But GDDR6 is better than GDDR6X is superior to GDDR6, right? If we look at the numbers, this is hard to tell because on one hand you've got more CUDA cores, but on the other hand you've got the less VRAM. I guess at the end of the day, the performance benchmarks are revealing in themselves, right? The 3080 is superior to the 2080 Ti in terms of gaming performance, as well as a whole host of other creative benchmarks, rendering, for example.
Okay, so I think the other things that we see are, it obviously has second generation RT cores for ray tracing. So this would actually make it perform extremely well in ray traced games. And it also has third generation tensor cores, which actually allows a much better AI processing of any of those DLSS features.
That's right. So just for the uninitiated, when we talk about ray tracing cores and tensor cores, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is different kinds of processing units dedicated to different purposes. So for example, tensor cores, they are dedicated to, compute, deep learning kind of compute. So DLSS will use your tensor cores to compute those things, right? Having second generation or third generations of these cores compared to this, the 20 series, this just simply means more performance for you guys.
From my understanding, the 3080 series brings in a whole new generation of gaming prowess, right? And it's basically launched at a price point and at so much power compared to the previous 20 series graphics cards. So what does this mean for gamers in general? Like, what are gamers lacking now that these cards are going to help bring?
Well, I mean, when you game, the resolution of your game plays a big part of your experience. It plays a big part in your experience, right? The higher the resolution in-game, the more pixels have to be rendered, and therefore, the harder your graphics card has to work. Previously, with the 2080 Ti, we're looking at, maybe about 30 to 40 frames a second for a lot of games, right? On ultra settings, for example.
You mean on 4K, yeah?
4K, sorry, on 4K, thanks. So on 4K, with the 2080 Ti, you would get, I guess, mega 4K performance. You wouldn't really be pushing the 60 FPS limit. So yeah, I mean, with the 3080, the performance is superior. You would be getting significantly smoother gaming performance at 4K on ultra settings, and I think at a lower price point than the 2080 Ti, making the value proposition incredible.
Okay, so just to sum up, can I say that this is the first time 4K gaming is truly accessible to the mass market?
I would say so.
Okay, and at a really affordable price point, but we don't know the price yet, do we?
Well, we'll talk about that later at the end of the video when we go through the different cards, because every AIB partner has a different price for the card. But I mean, compared to the 2080 Ti, it is cheaper.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the other differences between this and the Founders Edition. I think many of you are looking at online at reviews now, and the reviews are all showing Founders Edition cards, right? So one key difference is power draw. The power supply, power connectors, right? As well as the cooling design of the Founders Edition, right? So you see the Founders Edition having one blower fan at the back, as well as one pass-through fan, nearer. On the other side of the card, and this, does improve cooling performance despite the 3080 having a higher power draw compared to the 2080 Ti. Sean, what were those numbers again for power draw?
On load, it should sit about 320 watts.
320 watts, which is more than the 2080 Ti. I believe it was about 250 watts for the 2080 Ti. And I mean, just to translate all these numbers for you guys, more power means you're supplying more electrical energy to the card, and all this energy has to be dissipated somehow. It's heat, right? It becomes heat. So with a higher power draw on the 3080, we'd expect higher temperatures, but because the Founders Edition's cooling design is slightly different, temperatures for the 3080, as we've seen so far on the Founders Edition's benchmarks that we've seen online, the temperatures are not significantly impacted. In fact, I believe compared to the 2080 Ti Founders cards, the temperatures of the 3080 Founders are slightly better. Today, we have with us two add-in board cards. They don't sport the exact same Founders Edition design, but we'll have to wait for the publicly available 3080 drivers before we can benchmark any of these and give you the temperature scores. I guess the last thing we want to talk about before we dive into unboxing these cards is these are PCIe Gen 4 cards, right, Sean?
Yes, they are rated as PCIe Gen 4, but they are also backward compatible with PCIe Gen 3. And I think the question that everyone had online was whether it is compatible with PCIe Gen 3, which is all the motherboards now, except the newer AMD systems. So the answer is yes, it is backwards compatible. So anyone who has a current generation PCIe Gen 3 or 4 will still be able to use the cards. But I think the question that we had was, would the bandwidth be limited on PCIe Gen 3 when you're going to run, whether it's your deep learning workloads or whether you're going to run games? Is the PCIe Gen 3 platform bottlenecking your PCIe Gen 4 RTX30 series graphics cards?
Right. Well, I mean, based on the, we don't have any benchmark numbers yet, we've not done any testing, right? But based on our research online, what we've seen is that the CPU still plays a larger impact in the performance of any task, right? Gaming for one. If you're going to worry that the PCIe Gen 3 bottleneck is, significant, I would say worry a bit more about whether your CPU can handle what the 3080 is going to throw at it.
So for example, if you are still using something like an 8700K or 6700K, and you're purely gaming at 1080p resolution, getting the 3080 card is not going to help your frames because at this point, your CPU is going to bottleneck your performance. However, if you're gaming at 4K and you have something like a 10900K, you know, getting a 3080 or 30 series cards will benefit your gameplay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's still the last bit of confusion that I guess there can only be teased apart when we do our benchmarks. But there's this new technology called RTX IO, right? I mean, to summarize it, basically RTX IO bypasses your CPU for any storage needs, right? So having the graphics card linked directly through the chipset to your storage devices could remove the CPU bottleneck for something like your 8700K. But you know, we'll have to see. I guess we've talked enough about what the 3000 series looks like, or 30 series, sorry. Now, shall we just look at the cards that we have?
Okay.
Okay, let's take a look. So what we have here today is the Palit RTX 3080 GamingPro OC. Let's unbox this baby, shall we? You know, we were so excited when these cards came, right? I mean, everybody in the office was like, oh, what's this, what's that?
How do you like the new packaging for Palit?
Well, it's different. I think it's a bit more exciting would be the term.
So it looks like it has some RGB accents here, you can see.
That's right.
Actually, Eugene, I miss the days where, you know, all these graphics cards had these fairies and these elves on the packaging. I don't know if you guys remember, maybe it's during my generation where, you know, you had Voodoo 3D,
Oh.
yeah, you know, and ATI back then, it wasn't AMD card, it was ATI.
Right, right.
And they had all these funky 3D generated
Like they look really 2D, right? Yeah.
So I really miss those days. You know, we don't get that anymore with these cards.
Not anymore, but hopefully this is a step in a better direction. Okay.
What do you have there?
We'll have a user manual from Palit. I don't actually know why anyone needs these because, you know, basically you put the graphics card in the slot and you plug a power connector in and the graphics card turns on. So this is a user manual, right? What else do we have here? Oh, this is a nice one, right? This is a sag holder. Right, in case you guys don't know what this is for, a sag holder is meant to prevent your graphics card from sagging. Right, because of the weight of the card and gravity, of course, the graphics card could deform over time. So having this sag holder here would will mitigate that a little bit. Let's take a look at how this looks like.
So I think what's happening here is the new 30 series cards are extremely powerful, and because, as Eugene mentioned earlier, it draws more power. So it requires much more beefier GPU cooling solutions, and therefore the cards are much heavier. And a much heavier card is prone to sagging. And it's nice to see vendors like Palit, you know, keeping consumers in mind and including a GPU, what do you call it?
Sag holder.
Sag holder.
Yeah, well, yes, it is a GPU sag holder.
Sag
guys.
preventer, sag.
Yeah. In case you're wondering, this is acrylic. Okay, so it's pretty nice, pretty solid, which means that any RGB LEDs that you have in your PC will shine through, right? It's not like a solid piece. I mean, it's a solid piece, but it's not opaque. That's the term I was looking for. Let's look at the card itself. Anything else in there? No, I don't think so. Brand new, unopened graphics card over here. Wow. I mean, I guess different graphics cards have different kinds of reputations all over the world, right? In Singapore, at least, Palit is not the first choice. It's not what many users would consider their first choice. And I actually don't know why, because if you look at the backplate over here, it looks really solid, don't you think?
I kind of like the way the GeForce text is, you know, oriented. Because usually you see words going across the card like this, but this is one of the cards that actually have it in this way.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. And you can see all the honeycomb, which is interesting because previously I don't think backplates catered for a pass-through like this. Because traditionally I think the PCB stretched all the way to the end of the card, and this is interesting. This is sort of like the Founders Edition where it had a pass-through area.
So I guess what these card manufacturers, these add-in board manufacturers might be doing is taking a page out of Nvidia's book, considering an alternative cooler design. Instead of just blowing it out right through the side, some of the air can go out the back, and that might improve the thermal performance, but we'll have to take a look. First, this lights up with RGB. And this area here lights up with RGB as well. But if you ask me, the cooler design is a bit complex. It's a bit too complex for my liking actually. So you have one fan here that has the Palit sticker on it. You have another fan here that's covered by the GP, which stands for GamingPro. And at the end here, a fan that doesn't have any sticker, but is covered by this metallic plate on top with the words GamingPro on it.
I think they're going for sort of a steampunk look, you know, with the metallic accents and like Iron Man's heart.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I will agree. I mean, if they have just stuck to a single Palit word, that would keep it a bit cleaner. But I think overall it looks pretty solid. It doesn't look cheap.
Yeah, it doesn't look cheap.
I think that's important. It has a very thick radiator. What's the slot size?
Well, let's look at that. Specs wise, this height here is 60 millimeters, and that is 2.7 slot. Okay. Right? Length wise, we're talking about 294 millimeters from PCIe bracket all the way to the end. Right? Yeah, that's the dimensions for this card. So I guess other specific ones, specific features of this card include this thing called, Palit says it's called the AAA die casting plate kit, right? So what that means is that there are aluminum plates here that are covering the circuit board fully, right? And that directly attaches to all the hotspots on the PCB, So what this does is provide two kinds of benefits. Okay, the first is anti-sag, right? As we mentioned earlier, the card is heavy, it tends to sag, right? But with a solid backplate, that prevents the sag from happening, okay? Mitigates the sag at least, right? Second, with a heat conduction, through these aluminum alloy plates, you do get slightly better thermal dissipation as well. So, good one, Palit. I guess the design does, increase the appeal for the card over here. Other than that, I think we do have RGB, as we mentioned just now, RGB here, here, and here as well, all controllable by, Palit's Thunder Master utility. So if you own a Palit card already, you know how to use it, you can control these regions over here, right?
What about the power requirements?
Oh, well, if you recall, Nvidia's founder cards had this new 12-pin power connector, right? But these added board cards don't seem to share that same power connector. These look like the standard 8-pin power connectors that you have for your current graphics cards. I guess the difference here is because the PCB might be a bit different from the founder's PCB, right? Whereas Nvidia tried to shrink the PCB to accommodate for the new cooler design, they had to change the way the power connector was designed, right, to fit onto the new PCB. But these guys don't look like they've redesigned the PCB very much, which means that you could still use your two 8-pin power connectors.
But the interesting thing to note is that on the 3080 Founders Edition, because of the shrunken PCB, the 12-pin connector was actually in the middle of the card. So when you actually routed cables out, it looked pretty weird.
It did.
Even with the included braided cable splitter for your old PSUs, it still looked extremely weird coming out.
Yeah.
And you can see it here on the Palit as well. It's closer to the center. Traditionally, I think cards will always have the power connectors at the end. And this is because the Palit card has also taken a page out of Nvidia's book by making a smaller PCB.
Right. Well, other than that, the card looks great, I think. Feels sort of heavy as well, actually. Sean, why don't you just take a gander at it?
Yeah, I think very, very beefy for, I don't see any of those 2-slot coolers or those 2.25 slot coolers. So I'm pretty sure that this will run quite cool.
All right, quite cool indeed. On the note of cooling, does this have a zero fan design, a 0 RPM fan design, do you know?
Yeah, I think on the Palit website it says 60-degree 0 dB fan design, which basically means that the fans are not gonna spin up until you hit about 50 to 60 degrees, which is perfect if you want some silence in the room while you're basically not making use of the GPU's graphical power. For example, if you're surfing YouTube, just surfing the internet, the card will not spin up. If you're playing games at 4K or whatever games you're playing, then it will start to spin.
Right. If you're worried, so if you get this card and you put it in and the fans don't spin, don't be worried, right? The card is just cold.
Your PC is not spoiled.
It's not spoiled. If I were to draw an analogy, it's sort of like turning on the aircon. If the aircon is on, you're cold, you don't need to turn on the fan as well. So, just a public service announcement over here. Okay, so I think that's most of it for this card, right? We've covered the cooling for the card, we've covered the power for the card, some of the aesthetic elements over here. Do you want to take a look at yours?
Yeah, okay. So the only other card that we have on hand is actually the MSI Ventus. So RTX3080 Ventus 3X10G OC. Alright, look at it.
Awful, man.
So previously, I think the Ventus line was sort of MSI's entry level, and then it had the Gaming X Trail above that with more fancy RGBs and a higher price point. But the Ventus card has always been a great performer with great cooling performance at affordable price, and it was also an OC edition, so it really didn't take away that much from the much more premium card. So we're just gonna quickly pull up the previous Ventus card, and you can see this is the previous Ventus card. I'll just show it to you guys here.
That's a 2070 Super, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is not the 3080. What we have in here is the previous 20 series Ventus compared to the 30 series that's still in the box.
Okay, so you can see this is a 2.25 slot design with a very much more minimal cooling design. It has 6 pins plus 8 pins. So you can already tell that the TDP is much lower. Backplate here is plastic. So we're just gonna put this aside while we unbox the 3080.
Or yours?
Well, I'm excited, man. So MSI has always been a close partner of ours, and we really can't wait to show more of their cards. I think there's also the Gaming X Trail version of this, which will only come out, I think sometime next week. So again, you have the nice MSI UV printed manual, but as Eugene says, you know what are instruction manuals for? It comes with its usual graphics guide, how do you install it, some product warranty cards, and a comic book of Lucky the Dragon.
Wow, it's 2 Luckies.
2 Luckies, and it sort of tells you how to install the graphics card.
Which you probably already know because you're on YouTube and there are a whole ton of instructional videos online.
But yeah, cool. We love Lucky, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, so and now the moment we've been waiting for. Similar to the Palit, we can see it includes a GPU sag holder, but I don't think it's called a sag holder. It's probably called a brace, a GPU brace, bracket, GPU bracket.
Thank you.
And this time it's a steel aluminum metal piece. You can see it here. You can see it here. With a nice UV, spot UV MSI logo as well. So this one is non-see-through, it's fully metal, so yeah, you probably won't see any RGBs behind it.
Yep.
Okay. And the card itself.
Wow.
Wow. Okay, it's definitely quite beefy. I would say it's a bit heavier than the Palit card. So I'll just put this down here like this. Okay, so we'll just talk a little bit about the design that I can see. It's in a sort of a brushed aluminum finish, but this is plastic, but it's in a brushed aluminum finish. It has some silver accents here, and you can see 3 Torx 3.0
Torx fans. I guess they're called Torx fans.
Torx
T-O-R-X.
3.0 fans, which supposedly help, better performance, better cooling. What's different about the fan?
Well, I mean, you can see all sorts of marketing numbers online about how many percent better this is, but in reality, there is actually a difference, between these fans and traditional fans. So if you take a close look, the fan blades are actually in an alternating design. One blade is traditional, it's just flat, curved but smooth. The other sports these little ridges on it, which I guess are the Torx blades, right? These help to capture the extra air, providing more airflow, and I guess that helps to bolster MSI's claims about 15% more airflow. Or
I hear you're a physics tutor.
I used to be a.
So does this have anything to do with Bernoulli's effect?
I wasn't a A-level physics tutor. I don't think we did Bernoulli's effect in O-levels. So yeah, I mean, 3 MSI Talks fans is a more consistent design compared to the Palit card, right?
These look like 92mm fans.
I think so. Last we measured was 92. We don't have a ruler now, do we?
Okay, I mean, we'll put that in the description below.
Yeah, bet on the size of the fan.
So it has also these little nice triangle designs, diamond designs, which are like Superman emblems, right? But yeah, I mean, small thing.
Yeah.
Just moving the card around, you can see the MSI logo printed here, and GeForce RTX. It doesn't have the 3080 name on this end, which is sort of a shame because, you know, when you have people looking into your PC, you want them to see that you've got the best graphics card.
Yeah.
There.
But I think this is the same as the Palit, right? If you recall earlier on, the side-by-side comparison over here, you still see the GeForce RTX without the 3080.
It's strange.
Yeah, strange, huh? I would have liked to see, you know, a 3080 mentioned somewhere on this.
Moving on, the power connectors here on this card are at the end of the card. And you can also see that the PCB extends sort of almost all the way. And it doesn't have a pass-through like the previous Palit card. This is flat. So there's also a unique thing that we saw on MSI's marketing materials, and that the backplate isn't plastic. It isn't plastic or steel or aluminum. It's
Graphene.
Where else have we seen graphene technology being used?
I actually can't remember. I'm on top of my head right now. I know somewhere, but
Come on.
you know, graphene.
The cryo rig.
I'm sorry?
The cryo rig cooler?
Is that graphene as well?
Yeah. The cryo rig C7, I think.
But that was copper.
No, so they had the normal one, and then they had the copper one, and then they had a limited edition graphene. Which
okay.
basically you paid a whole ton more for like 0.5% improvement.
Right.
But improvement nonetheless, right?
Yeah. I mean, any improvement is better than no improvement, right?
So I think the point here is that graphene is an extremely good conductor of heat, which means it can dissipate heat from the card more efficiently. So having this on the backplate actually helps because it keeps the card cool at the same time.
Yeah. Well, if you're wondering how it actually feels like a bit like sandblasted, you know, sandblasted aluminum, but without that kind of metallic, you know,
sheen or feel.
Yeah. So actually, it feels really solid. I noticed this card doesn't have any RGB on it as compared to the Palit one.
Which I like,
yeah,
personally.
Actually, it looks like a really solid graphics card. You know, it looks like this is something that you can throw at somebody and won't break.
Wow, okay.
You know, I mean,
Eugene.
doesn't look cheap at all, right? It looks more solid than I would consider a card that has, sorry, I'm losing my words here. But I mean, what I mean to say is, in a world where all your graphics cards have all sorts of RGB on them, right? MSI, I think, has done a great job in trying to distinguish themselves from the rest, even with their Ventus cards, because, you know, this, in a lineup of colorful RGB, stands out by itself. It's solid design, the muted aesthetic with this graphene backplate over here. You know, good job, MSI.
Okay, so, but what I would like to add is that it would be nice if they had LEDs in terms of their logos, and then users could configure them to be pure white or pure red or whatever color that you want. So little nice LED accents, RGB accents, I think are nice, and still keeping things very minimalist. So on to, you know, how rigid the card is. MSI actually introduced this anti-sag technology. Basically, you can see this L-shaped plate that extends almost all the way to the end of the PCB is here. It extends all the way here, and by bracing it all the way, it actually keeps the graphics card from sagging, on top of having something like a anti-sag plate.
Sag holder.
A sag holder.
Yes, a sag holder.
Yeah, so on to I/O. The I/O, we can see actually it has 3 display ports, 1.4A, and also one HDMI 2.0. Was it 2.1?
It's 2.1.
2.1.
Yeah. Actually, is there a problem with the ports? Sean, why can't I see them?
Why can't you see them? Oh, because they have dust covers on them. So if you guys receive your new PCs with dust covers on them, just simply remove them and you can plug in your monitor.
That's right.
So I think the Why we're saying this is because the number one question customers ask us when receiving the PC is, hey, we've just received our PC, we've turned it on, but we have no display. And then what's the solution for that?
Plug your monitor to the graphics card. The port that you may need to use may be covered by a dust cover, so please remove the dust cover and plug the cable to the graphics card and not the motherboard. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
But to be fair, I think in some instances where there's no graphics card available, you do plug your monitor into the motherboard. Okay?
Okay, awesome, cool.
So let's just put the cards side by side, and then we can really clearly see. Let me put this back in. Clearly see the difference in the two cards. Okay, so obviously the MSI card is beefier. It has a bigger cooling system compared to the Palit card. It is slightly longer. I believe this card is 305 millimeters in length.
305. The Palit the Palit one comes in at, I believe, 294.
294.
Yeah, 294.
Both are 2.7 slot width cards, so they're pretty big. But yeah, I'm gonna guess both cards, perform extremely well within their limits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to demystify this for you guys a little bit, the length is this way. And when Sean mentions 2.7 slots, what he really means is this thing over here. Right? So the slot height is dictated by the number of PCIe slots the card would cover if it were in your case. And if you're wondering what a PCIe slot is, turn your PC around. Those horizontal things that are covered by these, bracket cover things, you can remove them. Those are slots, which means that this one would take 2 slots and a bit more. Okay, so for most large ATX cases, you won't have to worry about whether a 2.7 slot card will fit, except if you've got something like an expansion card underneath the graphics card.
So what this means is that when you're going to buy a graphics card as large as this one, where it takes up 2.7 PCIe slots, you have to make sure you buy the correct motherboard to ensure that the first PCIe slot gives you sufficient room until it gets to the next PCIe slot, so you can add on more PCIe cards, like for example, Elgato capture card if you're a streamer, or even a Wi-Fi card, or what other cards can there be, like a sound card, but I don't think people really use sound cards these days. Sorry, creative.
Oh dear. Oh yeah, so I mean, in terms of length, both of them are pretty similar, about 1 cm difference. The MSI card is 1 cm longer. The slot height is about the same, and as Sean mentioned, just be careful when you just buy these cards. If you have extra cards in your case other than your graphics card, just note. Okay, so this would likely fit in an ATX case like the 500D, not a problem there, right? I don't think we need to put it in to see whether it fits. But we were quite concerned when we looked at some smaller mid-tower cases like the 220T by Corsair as well, right? If I'm not mistaken, the 220T sports a GPU max clearance. I mean, online it states the clearance is 300 millimeters. This is 305, and it's 5 millimeters more than the maximum clearance. So we were just worried, that this card wouldn't be able to fit in the 220T. Right? So why not we just take the chassis now, and then let's try and put it in and see where it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, just try our best. Logan, I need you to pass me the chassis. Thank you. I'm sorry. Maybe I should have told Logan before the video started. That
maybe you should have.
Yeah, maybe I should have. Okay, I mean, the Palit card we have no issue, right? Because the Palit card is smaller. So let's just leave that out.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we have the 220T here.
Yep.
A very popular case. Yeah. But it is known for being slightly on the small side when it came to radiator compatibility. But all in all, it should fit most components most of the time.
Yep.
So in this case, no pun intended.
Nice.
Does it fit one of the longest cards we've seen in a while? Okay, it barely fits. Sort of brushing
the fans a little
bit when you enter, but I think once it goes in.
All right. Okay, I'm in.
All right.
I'm in with, I think, about 1 centimeter of clearance actually. And these are the stock fans that come with the 220T. So looks like actually, despite Corsair's 300 millimeter length GPU length limit, the 305mm MSI RTX3080 Ventus 3X does fit the 220T.
So actually, who's telling the truth? Is the MSI card really 305mm or is the case really 300mm?
I guess we could measure the MSI card, but you know, all you need to know is that the 220T takes cards that are this length or less. Okay, so
So just to take note, if you do get this card on the 220T, you cannot front mount a radiator.
Yep.
So just keep that in mind.
Yep, you mount the radiator in the front, you're not gonna have space for your graphics card. You gotta get rid of one of those too. Right? Cool.
So what other cases shall we talk about?
I mean, with large cases, no one really has many questions. I think small form factor cases are the big question here, Sean. The NZXT H1 was a very popular case mid or early 2020, right? NZXT released that tower obelisk looking the H1, right? This, I don't think, will fit the H1.
No, we haven't tried.
Yeah,
So I don't think you should say that.
Oh, okay. Oops. Well, anyway, what we do know is that we have the highly acclaimed Cooler Master NR200 over here. Oh, let me lay flat down as well. Okay.
And I think this is one of the most popular cases that has been created by Cooler Master to date. It closely mimics and resembles the very, very famous and very popular N-Case M1, which is huge in the small form factor community. So, having sort of an N-Case M1 layout made by Cooler Master, it's still premium, at a very much lower price point and mass availability. I think this is one of the cases that I'm looking forward to building, a RTX 30 series in.
Yep. What's really unique about this is that despite mimicking the N-Case M1's layout, this is slightly larger, which means that you can take 3-slot graphics cards vertically or horizontally, and with room to spare. So the maximum length clearance on this case is 330mm, which means even if this guy is lying about his length, you could go in anyway, right? So 305 in 330, that's less than 330, so no issues. Do I need to put this in?
Let's just see whether it fits.
Okay.
So you can mount it either vertically, like this. It has the GPU riser there. So it definitely fits.
Yeah.
Already with quite a fair bit of space. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I want
and yeah, if you're gonna rotate it this way and remove the radiator here, it's also gonna fit.
Yeah.
So I think while the 220T may not fit the 3090, which is gonna come out 24th September, I think. That's a huge card. Even the RTX, the Founders Edition, is huge. Actually, the NR200 might.
Yeah, it might.
And that's pretty interesting because this is an ITX case. So when we are gonna build the most powerful small form factor system in the market, it will be on the NR200 with a 10900K because it can take awesome liquid cooling and still probably fit the 3090.
Yep. I mean, imagine the power density in that, right? The top of the line CPU cooled by a 240mm all-in-one cooler, and the top of the line 30 series graphics cards. I mean, in a small form factor, I guess how much more do you want to? How much more can you ask for?
And I'm gonna guess that in fact not many, maybe less than a handful of cases, ITX cases, can support such a configuration. You're talking about the NZXT
H210 maybe?
210, but that's not really an ITX case. It takes an ITX motherboard, but the case itself is pretty large. What else? I think all the sandwich cases are out. You can't use a Dan case. You can't use.
Yeah.
Will it fit our Dreamcore 1?
No, I don't think so. No way. No. I'm sorry, Sean. No. One can dream, one can hope, but maybe we'll take the Dreamcore 2.
Okay. So now we know it fits.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if you guys have any other cases that you'd like to know whether it fits, do drop a comment in the comment section below, and we'll be sure to take a photo and test it out for you.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, we've covered case compatibility, we've looked at the cards a little bit. Sean, tell me, who are these cards for?
So I think if you are a gamer who is probably going to revamp your whole system and predominantly aiming to play at 4K, not 1080p. You know, really the 30 series cards are for you.
Yeah. I mean, 4K gaming has always been just slightly out of reach for many people, but this affordable graphics card that surpasses what the 2080 Ti used to do. This makes it, the value proposition is just, I can't even describe it. If you want to play games at 4K, this is the card that you need.
And not only playing games at 4K, playing games at 4K with ray tracing turned on and DLSS.
Yeah.
So I think that is the current golden benchmark that everyone is striving towards. And I think 4K gaming will be the next big thing, with games like Doom Eternal supporting ray tracing, with games like Cyberpunk 2077, which will be launched in November.
Yeah, really excited about that.
Yeah, supporting ray tracing. And in fact, they have released very cool new screenshots of the game in fully ray traced mode. So we're really excited for those games.
Indeed. I mean, I've heard that Cyberpunk was delayed a number of times, right? And some are speculating that it's because you want to coincide with the 30 series launch.
Probably.
Yeah, but I mean, that's all speculation. All we know now is that these cards are available. Cyberpunk will be available on the 19th of November. That's a few months away, right? So if you're looking to gear up, I mean, why not?
Okay, but that being said, if you are not intending to, play at 4K, you're planning to play at 1080p, you're still going to play your CSGO, your Valorant, and all these other, what do you call them, RTS games?
No, FPS games.
FPS games.
Yeah.
The 20 series cards are actually still very viable options.
That's true.
Cards like the 2060, the 2060 Super, 2070 Super, these cards are still powerful enough for most users who are going to game at 1080p.
Yep.
So I don't think everyone really needs to rush out and get the 3080 unless you are chasing that top bracket where you want 4K gaming.
I fully agree. Personally, when I get my new 4K 144Hz monitor, like the Super Solid PU27 Pro, right? When I get that, I want something that's able to push 4K at a decent frame rate, and this is the card for me.
Okay, so and I think the other additional item here that we haven't talked about is actually the TDP or the TDGP, which is the power draw of the card.
Right.
This is the first time Nvidia, well, not the first time, but this is one of the rare times that Nvidia has come out with a card on launch day with quite a large TDGP of 300 over watts. Traditionally, they have been the efficient company where everything they launched was like 150, 180 with a new 8 nanometer or 7 nanometer architecture.
Yep.
So this is the first time it has 300 watts. But that being said,
I mean, if you consider
performance per watt.
Yeah, that's right. If you consider performance per watt, this still actually provides a ton of performance per watt. So in terms of power efficiency, despite it consuming more power than your 2080, your 20 series, we're looking at a very decent performance per watt in terms of power efficiency.
So I mean, we've gotten all this data from Hardware Unboxed. So they have done the full review, full benchmark across multiple games, and done really in-depth testing. So a huge shout out to them for providing these numbers. But yes, if you have time, do take a look at their review on the Founders Edition cards, and you will see that the performance per watt, performance per dollar is actually pretty awesome. The price point is really unparalleled for such a huge generational jump in performance.
Fully agreed. Lastly, if you're doing any kind of content creation, if you're using your PC for rendering with V-Ray, using it for Blender, even deep learning, for example, these cards come with a ton more CUDA cores. And for some of these render engines, they're not so CPU bound, right? Because if it's a GPU-based render engine, it's all full GPU. So double the number of CUDA cores would almost guarantee a double or very linear sort of performance gain. And I mean, like we said many times in this video, if you're looking at it from a holistic perspective, your price point is lower. This is going to be the new card powering, I would expect, many render engines all over Singapore, the world, and workstations like yours.
So if you're going to be running, for the AI guys, the deep learning guys, if you're going to be running TensorFlow 2, is it? Yeah, TensorFlow 2 and PyTorch, I think these scale extremely well with multi-GPU setups. You're talking about adding a card, you get an additional 92 to 95% increase in performance. So this is one of the first times you're gonna get a very affordable 4 GPU setup with huge deep learning capabilities.
Awesome. I mean, I think the last bit of the puzzle that we have to reveal is the price point, because that is key to this entire discussion, right?
Okay, so on Nvidia's website, the cards were listed as, first the 3070, which isn't launched now, it's listed at 790 Singapore dollars onwards. The 3080 is 1,100 onwards, and the 3090 is 2,365 onwards. So now we only have 3080, so let's see how close it comes to what sort of Nvidia has marketed.
Right. This is the MSI RTX3080 Ventus 3X 10G OC. Man, that is really a mouthful. But this card comes in at, I believe, $1,209. The price was last updated today, right? So $1,209 compared to what the 2080 Ti would come in at, maybe closer to $2,000, right? This is, almost half the price. So where's the logic in that, right? Next, the Palit one, right? This here is the GamingPro OC. So this comes in two versions, right? It comes in the GamingPro and the GamingPro OC version. The GamingPro comes in at $1,100, and the GamingPro OC, this one right here, just $25 more at 1,125 Singapore dollars. So, either of these cards, I would say almost double the performance for many things at half the price. In terms of value, we're talking about 4 times worth the value per dollar, right? So this is, to me, more than just a generational leap. This is a transformation.
And then actually, I think when you talk about the 2080 Ti all the time, this card doesn't compete with the 2080 Ti. It actually replaces the 2080 or the 2080 Super. And when you put that in context, it really blows our mind at how much more performance per dollar you're getting. For example, the RTX 2080 Super came in at about 1,100 Singapore dollars. And right now you're doing something like $1,150 to $1,200 for about 80% increase in performance, and to us that is just fantastic value. So if you're one of those guys who you have an old rig that you're really going to revamp this season for all the games that are coming this year, this is a fantastic time for you.
Yeah. Well, really excited. I can't wait to benchmark these cards, and get the performance numbers to you guys. But I guess we have to do that in another video. For today, do you have anything more to add, Sean?
No, I think we just have to see when all the other manufacturers give us the cards. Like Zotac, there's the Zotac Trinity. Gigabyte has the Eagle and Eagle OC cards. I think Asus have the ROG Strix cards as well.
And the tough ones, don't forget Asus.
And the tough ones, yeah. So we have a whole bunch of cards coming to us. These are just the two that have been kind enough to send us early samples. So yeah,
well, we'll show you more cards in the next video and hopefully give you performance benchmarks in that one as well. But I hope this was a good video for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. First time Sean and I on the video together. If you want to see more of this happening, let us know down in the comments below. If not, don't let us know. But if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications, and we'll see you in the next one.